thoughtful ideas and suggestions for guests and topics.
Events, programs, and
Welcome to this week's segment of Dialogue Houston. I'm your host, Lawrence Payne. To our regular viewing audience, welcome. To those joining us perhaps for the first time here for ACC's TV Dialogue Houston, we can be found now every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. and again on Saturday afternoons at 3 p.m. As always, at the top of the show, let me thank you for your thoughtful calls, emails, and text messages concerning previous shows we've aired here on ACC's TV, but particularly your ideas for guest topics and subjects to be covered on upcoming Dialogue Houston segments. For after all, this year's your community affairs, public affairs show on ACC TV, proudly now in its 29th season. This special segment of Dialogue Houston, as you know, is a partnership with Houston Public Library. We refer to this section as Living in New Knowledge. This is the Living in New Knowledge section of the Houston Public Library. And where does that name come from? It comes from this link card, L-I-N-K, Living in New Knowledge. And if you have not gotten your link card, your public library card, please do so, because it will open access to all kinds of things from a learning perspective that you will find very interesting as we go forward. Today's show is going to focus on an aspect of partnership that the Houston Public Library is doing, and I'll introduce the two persons who are going to help us understand this wonderful relationship and partnership going forward. First is Linda Nunnley, who is the Vice President, Client and Community Relations Director for PNC Bank, Houston, and Ophelia Gomes, who is the Deputy Assistant Director for System-Wide Programs and Community Education for the Houston Public Library. Welcome both to you, Linda and Ophelia. Good to have you on this afternoon. So Linda, let me start with you, because this is just such a wonderful partnership and idea. Why did PNC choose to work with the Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation to bring something excitingly called family place libraries to Houston Public Library?
Yeah, we've been partners with the Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation for a couple of years now, and we at the bank have an initiative through our foundation called Grow Up Great. Grow Up Great is a $500 million 15-year bilingual initiative to help kids, especially those in underserved areas, be ready for kindergarten. So as we were working with the Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation and looking for programs that we could help bring to Houston, the Family Place Libraries is something they've done here in town before, and we felt like that might be a good fit of how we could work together and come alongside that great work, bring more of those facilities to our Houston Public Library system.
Sounds like a great idea and a match made in heaven between PNC and the Barbara Bush Literacy Foundation. Ophelia, these wonderful family place libraries are going to be throughout. Can you tell us about the family place libraries and exactly how they will work?
We are, again, very grateful and thankful for PNC Bank support and the support from the Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation for bringing these family places to us. So we're going to have the family place libraries within two of our neighborhood libraries, and that is the McGovern Stella Link Library, as well as the Young Neighborhood Libraries. And so these family places are dedicated spaces within our libraries that are truly dedicated to families with young children. And it's a bright, vibrant, engaging space in libraries. It's not just your typical bookshelves. No, this is something new and different and exciting for our families and parents and caregivers, where they can engage in learning activities. So we have everything from board books to puzzles to games and activities. So it's really the place where parents, caregivers, and their children can learn and interact together. So we're so excited to have these at our two new locations.
This is really quite a commitment and investment of PNC, and I love your premise and title of Grow Up Great. I think that speaks volumes, because it is really about the early literacy and the early training. Tell us about why you have chosen to prioritize this early childhood education.
Studies show, right, 90% of the brain is grown by the time you're 5. So we've really kind of invested in this space of helping kids, especially those in underserved communities, be ready for the public education system so that by the time they reach the kindergarten, they're not so far behind. Those early experiences, that birth to 5 space, kinder readiness is so critically important because so much of the brain is developed by the time that they reach that age, that we felt, from a moral perspective in one case, but also from a workforce development perspective, this was the time to get to those kids and get them the resources they need so that they can grow up to be what they're created to be, and contribute to the communities the way that they are built to do so.
And that theme and that understanding of early literacy or early childhood development, Ophelia, what are some of the programs that are going to be held at the Family Place Libraries?
The Family Place network of libraries, they have an institute where our staff has gone to be trained in early learning and early literacy for children. And so we will have a 5-part series for parents and caregivers, and they're called parent-child workshops, where they'll be able to come in and learn and play for this 1 hour dedicated to their caregivers, working with the children, working in these spaces, and learning how to be their child's first educator. So it's very important that we have these programs in place, as Linda said, in these underserved communities and where they're so needed. Being a parent doesn't come with a manual, and so we're going to do the best we can to give them the tools and resources to be their child's first educator. We're kicking off in the fall with our programs, and there'll be a virtual opportunity as well as in person. So we're wanting to make this a hybrid program so that everyone can participate.
Linda, you said a word and mentioned a word that just struck a chord in me, because that's kind of what I understand this project to be in part. You said it's a moral obligation. It's the right thing to do. And so from that perspective, tell us a little bit more about why it's so important that young people from neighborhoods that perhaps does not have all the advantages of others, to really be able to develop their social, emotional, and cognitive skills and be ready and able to learn. And I think that's so important, and y'all have hit on such an important aspect of child growth and development.
I think really it comes down to how do we best serve this. How do we best serve these folks, right? And there's so many studies that show, the biggest indicator of future success, of life success, is are you reading on grade level by 3rd grade? So if you're not, there's studies that show, there's just all these negative life outcomes that are more likely to result. And not that it traces back to not being able to read on grade level, but it is an indicator of such, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, being able to graduate high school, being able to find gainful employment, staying out of the justice system. There's just all these things that just make it really hard for you to contribute to your community the way that you would otherwise be able to. And that all goes back to reading on grade level by 3rd grade. Well, the biggest indicator of will you be on grade level by 3rd grade is, did you enter kindergarten ready for kindergarten? So that's really why we've chosen to focus on this birth to 5 and kinder readiness, because children need time. They need time to develop sharing and how to manage your emotions and how to work in a team. And those are all the social emotional things that you mentioned. All that takes time. And then the cognitive ability of, many children are entering kindergarten after being in wonderful early learning environments, NACE accredited mortgage payment a month kind of daycares, or with a parent or a caregiver who stays at home and is equipped to give these kids really high quality early life experiences, which enables their brain to grow in a way that their foundation is strong. And as they receive more education, that education is built on this strong foundation and their life trajectory is great. Many children are entering kindergarten without that benefit. And so we just feel like it's so important that it doesn't matter if you're in a structured childcare environment, if you're home with mama or daddy or grandma, whoever is taking care of baby, how do we help our community equip those folks, to Ophelia's point, of being their first and best teacher, so that they are ready for kindergarten when they get there. They are able to sit and receive this education that they're being provided and build upon it, so that they can grow in life and in school.
And that's so important, because as you just so well brought to mind, many of those young students who are behind grade level, 3rd grade, not reading at grade level at 3rd grade, never catch up. They never catch up. And the dropout rate is large in those communities. Unfortunately, the criminal justice system and the school to prison pipeline understands that all too well. In some cases in the past, they've actually built prisons and left them sit empty, knowing that the population was coming, so they would be
Yeah.
ready. So it really is important to understand that early childhood development and being able to shape those young children's mind at that early age, and to assist their parents in what they need to know and do and their role in how they can help their children. You mentioned the other piece. It's literacy, yes, it's child development, but it's also things like nutrition and all the other things within communities and neighborhoods that play into these issues as factors into that growth and emotional development. And so I'm so proud of this relationship. Ophelia, it's really great to have these kind of partnerships with PNC Bank and the Barbara Bush Houston Foundation, Houston Foundation Literacy Foundation. And I think as HPL goes forward, these relationships and partnerships are going to be even more important, are they not?
Absolutely, Larry. I mean, we have such a large population that we serve. And so any help that the Houston Public Library can gain from partnerships, it really just helps further our mission. And our mission is, as Linda said, to have early learning as part of every family in Houston. And so with this initiative, we're able to reach families that we were not able to engage in that way. And so we would love to have more family place libraries all over our system, because it's so important, as you said. And we have the resources, and sometimes parents just don't know all the resources that the Houston Public Library has to help them with parenting, to help them with those issues that you mentioned, such as just child development and nutrition. And so in these family play series that we have, we're calling it the Family Place Play Series, because that's fun and engaging, but they're actually really going to learn from some experts. We'll have some engagement specialists with all of those issues and any questions that they have. So, but as you said, partnerships are just what makes it happen. We had a family place library back in 2018 that we were able to launch, but we haven't had another one since. And part of that is because we haven't had that support that we now have to have not one, but two new family place libraries. So we're so excited about that. We do have a long relationship with the Houston Barbara Bush Literacy Foundation, and we hope to have a long relationship with PNC Bank as well. You know, Larry, they have not only just provided funding, but they have been walking alongside of us every step of this way with planning. They have been in meetings with us to make sure that we're hitting all the points together, and they really have been the example of a true partnership. And so we're so grateful for that too.
Well, this is a great relationship and partnership. Linda, I remember even a little personal note here with Mrs. Bush and President Bush, Barbara Bush, who really believed in literacy and education and reading. I ran Habitat for Humanity here for a while in Houston, and I was fortunate to have Mrs. and Mrs. Bush come out to a dedication of one of the homes of our families, our new families, Habitat families. And Mrs. Bush brought books to give to the family for the children, because her point was that every home should have books so that students can have books available in their own home to read. And she made such a profound comments that day about how important it was to make sure that every household, every child has the advantage of having books in their home, and how important literacy was, and that it was that role that she plays as a teacher. That's her first love, and her first who her being, it really, I think, resonates with. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I think that's an important component of this work that we're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll have to apologize. I don't have the stat ready off the top of my head, Ophelia. Maybe you know, but there are studies out there that show that, you know, kids in affluent households have X number of books per child, and kids in less affluent households don't, right? And it's an extreme. And again, please don't quote me because I don't have the stat ready, but it's something nutty. Like kids in affluent households have access to 300 books before they're 5, and kids in poverty-stricken households might have one book per 300 kids. It is nutty. Literacy is so important. Learning to read is important. There's two things that happen as you sit with your child and you read them, right? One is cognitive, in that it is building their vocabulary, it is growing their brain. But there's also that social emotional piece of sitting on caregiver's lap, you know, having a healthy emotional connection and attachment. That type of thing also grows the brain differently than kids who don't have that interaction with responsible, loving adults, right? So reading can really be this double threat of building the brain in a way that helps kids receive education and building the brain in a way that helps kids be happy, healthy, well-adjusted children, and both are equally as important. There's so many studies and so many sayings, but one that sticks with me that Dr. Julie Fink, who's the head of the executive director for the Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation, often says is you learn to read until third grade, and then after third grade, you're reading to learn. So it really just goes back to that, can we get these kids where they need to be so that they don't fall so far behind? Because to your point, Larry, we don't have the resources to catch them up. We as a community, all over the United States, right? We don't have the resources to catch them up. So getting to them early, it decreases, behavior problems because kids aren't so frustrated. It decreases the time needed from additional interventionists to come in and help. So this is important work. It's expensive work, but honestly, we're going to pay for it at some point. We pay for it now when they're little, or we pay for it later with people entering the jail system or people needing assistance to pay their bills. I mean, we're going to pay for it. And the studies show, if you don't graduate high school, and therefore some of these other negative life, outcomes are more likely, you on average some people on average cost taxpayers $290,000 over the course of your life, because some of these negative things could happen, right? If you're going to jail or if you're on a social assistance. And of course, there's plenty of people who don't graduate high school and are perfectly fine. So I don't mean to insinuate anything other than that. But of those who don't find gainful employment and things like that, I mean, $290,000 over the course of your life. So why not take that investment and give it to these folks when they're little, and their life outcomes will be very different. And everybody, all of us as a community, will benefit because we need more happy, healthy, well-adjusted folks living here.
Yeah, we recently had Julie Baker Finch, the head of the Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation, here on Dialogue Houston, and she echoed many of the things you just said. And really, there's a clear pathway. And if you understand all the issues related to making sure that a clear pathway is there for every student, for every child, it becomes, as you said, a very interesting web of complexuality to look at how you address all the social economic realities that impinge on what sounds in some ways a very simple, easy system to implement. That it's not. There are so many stumbling blocks and roadblocks for many communities and neighborhoods. And that's why it's always so important to have that contact with your neighborhood library, because that's the resource right there in your own community and neighborhood. And now working in this great partnership with PNC and the Barbara Bush Literacy Foundation, we will hopefully expand this as we go forward. Ophelia, I understand there is a wonderful plan to grow these, not only the ones coming online the end of 2021, but in 2022 to also open more of the wonderful libraries of this nature. Tell us about that.
That is our hope. So we're starting first with the McGovern Stella Link Neighborhood Library, and that's where we're going to have our big ribbon cutting and be celebrating that space. And then we'll move on to the Young Neighborhood Library as well. And our hope is to continue to grow with these family places. I just wanted to take a step back when you were talking about in-home libraries. So part of this program absolutely includes us having books that will go into the homes. And so when people register and sign up and join us, they'll learn and grow at the session, but then they'll be able to take those books home with their children so that they can begin to build those home libraries. So that is a very important part of this program, and something that we've been building into our other summer programs, even virtually, is having book giveaways as part of that, because we really are trying to build up those home libraries. Another program that we've been kicking off this year is 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten. So we want to challenge parents and encourage parents to read up to 1,000 books with their child before kindergarten. So just another way that we're trying to have dedicated time for these parents to engage with their child and really learn how play that uses the same neural pathways that reading includes. And so that's what's so important about these family play series, is that with play, they're learning how to engage with their child. They're learning how to be their teacher. And then they're also learning the interests of the child. So some of those things, without this dedicated time and space, you may not know otherwise. Parents are very much bombarded with screen time. Children are bombarded with screen time. Even little children So the activities that we have at these play places are not screens, they're not technology. They are, things that you can touch and feel and smell. And so it's really just a great way for them to learn together. But again, to your point of building these out in the future, absolutely. I mean, that's our goal, that's our plan. So, this is a wonderful start to that partnership. And then we'll grow and change, evolve as we need to, because we are wanting to make sure that it's engaging and that people want to come. People want to come to the library, and just dispel the myth that when you come to the library, you're just going to read books and you're just going to sit quietly, because that's not the case, and especially not in family place libraries.
No, it's not. In fact, a lot of the programs in the library is there's a lot of action and moving around and great activities. Let's talk in the little time we have left, and I'll just use myself as an example. Growing up in a small town in East Texas, the library was my lifeline. The library ended up being the public library, being my lifeline to the rest of the world, to the rest of the United States, to understand there's something bigger than my little neighborhood and my community and my little city. And I spent many, many hours in the library. And then when we had the Summer Reading Challenge program, I really got into that because I was determined to read more books than anybody else to get the award and the prizes. But it really is important to have accessibility. It sounds simple again, but these things are important. And of course, more so in certain neighborhoods and socioeconomic neighborhoods than others, to be able to have ready access to these things. Julie, I just want to go, and Lynn, excuse me, I just want to go back to that wonderful phrase of growing up great. Your company, your organization obviously have invested, as you said, many, many dollars in this, and will continue to do so from the sound of this plan that you've laid out. But it's important at some point, do you not think, to challenge other corporations to do the same and other companies to do the same in partnership with you and yours and obviously with the library and the Barbara Bush Foundation and others? Because when you look at the overall tasks and you look at the numbers and you look at the students population here in the HISDs, and ISDs in the greater Houston area, it is a daunting number who are really behind and who need our help and our services.
I mean, we haven't engaged in any sort of challenge, right? There are great companies doing great work in a lot of different areas.
Yes.
The needs here
Yes.
then are so great, right? HEB is an active player in the early learning space, and there's a lot of private philanthropy happening here in Houston specifically that supports this space. But I mean, golly, all of the corporations here are so giving and philanthropic, and everybody has their different focus areas. And workforce development is critically important, and preserving the arts is critically important. So no, to answer your question, we haven't really challenged anybody to get involved in this space specifically. But if anybody wants to join us, we're happy. There's no pride in ownership here, and the need is
Right.
there, and we are happy to have you on board.
And the only reason that I thought about that is when I mentioned even the Summer Reading Challenge. There's something about a little competition is always good. And you mentioned that the corporations that you had mentioned, particularly HEB and others, of course, are doing their lion's share in this area, in this work. But it also seems to me that the overall task is so large, and it's in some ways daunting only if you see it as a daunting task. And the economy of scale that needs to be ramped up to be able to reach the majority of the children. And that's why I know even my work through the library, we get calls all the time about who can we refer people to, who can we go, and we have great resources. So we can always refer to someone. Ophelia, tell us a little bit how you see this area of need and expansion and growth.
What we learned in the pandemic is that parents really were looking for some guidance. They were looking for how to keep their kids entertained since they couldn't go out. And so we had to go and pivot and develop take and make activities and, online activities. And, we really understood that there is such a great need for this small age group, between like 0 to school. So we had ABC Junior boxes that we created, and we provided everything that you would need to have an activity at home with your child. And so we've just seen how important it is. And then, of course, we know with the pandemic and then people losing what they've been learning, and that the online environment was not as supportive. So just, from 0 all the way to 18, we know that there's just such a need to support our school system. There's such a need to support our parents and caregivers. And so anything that we can do, and that's what we're doing now, we're doing everything we can to be as supportive as we can with the resources that we have, and also engage our parents. So, and let them know that we're here and we're ready to help and support them. So with the Family Play series, we've got some engagement polls that are out right now where parents and caregivers can go online and kind of choose and look at the books that we are selecting for these series, and they can vote, you know, and that's just a way to get people excited about it, to get them engaged and understand that we're here to support them, and we're here to provide every resource that we can for them. But as you said, going forward, it's just becoming more and more important that we as a community come together, and it's not just relying on the school system, that we as a community have to all come together, you know, private and public, to be able to make sure that there is this full focus, as we've been saying, this full focus on those early precious years of learning. That's really what we have to do as a community.
We have a few minutes left, so I'm going to turn to Linda. Linda, any closing thoughts or points that we have not mentioned and touched on that you'd like to make sure we mention before we have to leave here?
Sure. We at the bank, and I'm representing the PNC Foundation today because that's who made the grant. We're just so grateful for people like Julie and Ophelia, and systems like the Houston Public Library System, organizations like Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation, and others like the Children's Museum, and there's countless organizations that are doing this incredibly important work. And we're just so grateful that there are those people and those organizations out there, and that they allow us to partner with them in this way. I mean, we're bankers, y'all. Like, we are not experts in this space, and we recognize that, right? But we are so passionate about finding those experts in this space and coming alongside them and providing much needed funds and suggestions or what have you, to be the most helpful that we can be, because it is honestly part of our business model to be serving the communities in which we do business. And this is just one of the many ways that we have been able to do that here in Houston.
Thank you very much, Lynn. That was wonderful. Ophelia?
We are so grateful to have, again, this wonderful opportunity provided by PNC Bank and the Barbara Bush Houston Literacy Foundation. It's the start to a wonderful relationship. And so we're so grateful to have that support, not just in funds, but also in the partnership, the true partnership. And I will just add that, people can go online to houstonlibrary.org/Family Place Libraries if they want to learn more about the Family Place Libraries, as we're bringing them online. And then just the same place they can go to vote for those early learning or early literacy books that we're asking them to choose for the program.
Linda, Ophelia, I cannot thank you enough for being on this segment of Dialogue Houston for such a time as this, and also for the wonderful helping us understand how we all need to live in new knowledge. Thank you very much. Let me just share this closing thought. It is about impact. It is about community impact. It is about return on investment. It's about all those things. And these companies and these organizations, our wonderful guests today from PNC, the Barbara Bush Literacy Foundation, our partnerships that we have with the Houston Public Library, are making that impact. And part of that impact comes with understanding not only that we need to serve the downstream reality of the things we see in front of us that the circumstances and situations have caused and created, be they social, economic, and others. We need to respond to those. But we also need to do upstream thinking, to look at the long term, how we can do some eradication, some systemic change, how we can perhaps look at addressing systems that cause these issues to continue to be with us disproportionately, as we know, in many neighborhoods and communities. Because that's really what it's all about. It's not an either or discussion, it's a both and. You need the immediate service and help. We also need to think strategically about what can we do to help talk about eradication and make some of that a reality going forward. This is a great partnership, a great effort. Again, I thank you, Linda, from PNC, Ophelia, and all the wonderful people working with this project. We will continue to update you on this as we go forward, and we look forward to you joining us in future segments of Dialogue Houston. And until then, as always, peace, power, and love.